Welcome to Unmasking Social, where we talk about building real friendships and meaningful connections without masking who we truly are. I'm your host, Sharon Baum, a speech and language pathologist with an expertise in social thinking and how it relates to autism and ADHD, specifically with our teens and tweens. Let's dive in.
One of the key things we can do when we're working with our teens and tweens with ADHD and autism is to make sure that the parents are part of the picture. And not just part of the picture in a small way, but in a huge way. On today's episode, we have a wonderful individual who takes us on a journey of how not only coaching teens and tweens themselves to help empower them, but also strengthen their parents' abilities to support them in so many different contexts and situations.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Unmasking Social. Today, we have someone who can really make us think a little bit more about the parents. And for the parents who are listening out there, can really offer us some support and just talk about her work with parents over the years. Trievel is not just an educator, but she's also a parent mentor and certified autism specialist with over 20 years of experience helping neurodivergent families build real connection and confidence. She's the creator of the Empowered Mom Method, a neuroscience-based framework that helps moms shift from burnout and constant reactivity to a calm, clear, and an ability to trust in themselves and their own kids. After navigating her own journey, raising both a daughter and now her autistic grandson, Tara learned firsthand how traditional parenting and school systems often miss the mark. Her mission is to bridge the gap between therapy and transformation, teaching families how to regulate, reconnect, and rebuild peace from the inside out. So, Tara, first of all, thank you so much for being here on Unmasking Social.
Thank you so much for having me, and you're very welcome.
And again, just thinking about the parents and all of the parents that are listening to this, or the neurodivergent individuals that are working alongside their parents as collaborators, what made you go on this journey of really deciding, okay, I have all this experience. I've been a very knowledgeable educator for so many years, but now I want to not just support the individuals with autism who are neurodivergent. I want to also really figure out how to best support the parents.
Great question. So, yeah, it's been a long journey. And to be honest with you, before I really focused on the parents, in my lessons with the kids, I would bring the parents in at the last 5 minutes. I would swap out with the parents and give them like a mini lesson. And they enjoyed it, of course. And then they kind of knew where the kids were coming from. And I wasn't coaching them. I was just kind of teaching them, but it ended up becoming more of a coaching opportunity during the pandemic, because parents were, much more connected. They were much more involved. So they needed to know so much more information. I mean, they were the teachers now, right?
Right.
So they were seeing what the teachers were seeing. They had no clue. So it's really opened their eyes. So that's really where I started supporting them more. They were hiring me to coach them as I was coaching their kids, but I didn't have the time. So I thought, what am I going to do? So I started group support, and then it led into a group course and support among the parents and support from me. That's where the Empowered Mom Method came in.
That sounds fantastic. I think COVID was really an eye-opening opportunity for so many of us, because I remember working in a school that had a very specific program for individuals with autism and ADHD, specifically teens and tweens, to which this podcast is geared to. And I just remember how the remote was a way for them to connect still, but it was also a way that was taking away from them kind of being in a setting that was still neuroaffirming at the same time, but staying social. And a lot of them and the parents were dealing with a lot of stressors at home. So I can only imagine how much you were being utilized at that time, because parents alongside their children were going through so much, and just even learning how to work with their children at home and being, like you said, like their educator, like their first line educator alongside the teachers. And so then you create this Empowered Mom Method, which some of the things that you speak to really speak to me, just because it's all about thinking about letting go and acceptance of some sort. And so many of the people that I speak to, the parents, whether on this podcast or parents of individuals that I've worked with or currently work with, they are such fierce advocates, but at the same time are really hard on themselves and they feel like they're not doing enough. What is your secret to really, you know, helping these parents realize, wait a second, I'm an advocate. I have a lot of abilities that I can do to help my individual, my child, and also at the same time accepting what is in front of them.
First of all, parents, you know your kid the best. You really do. You even know your kid better than they know themselves. So that's number one. So that awareness and that confidence in that. Because I think what happens is, yes, we are fierce advocates, but are we really, what are we advocating for? Are we advocating to convince somebody of something that maybe we're not sure of or we are sure of? We have to be aware of that first and know that nobody's going to see our kid the way we do. They're just not. No matter how helpful they want to be or they hope to be, um, it's just not going to happen. So the first thing is being aware of what you're trying to do. Are you trying to convince somebody, like I said, actually convince somebody of something, or are you trying to really advocate for your kid to get what they need, just what they need? And so the focus has to go on that. What I tell parents all the time, you are not supposed to teach anybody. You're not supposed to teach anybody about your kid's diagnosis. The diagnosis is there. That's all that needs to be known from somebody else. What you need to do is find out where your child is right now and what they need and advocate just for that, which is hard. I know. And it gets in the way because we feel like nobody's listening to us. They don't know what it's like to be us, on a daily basis. They just see the diagnosis. They don't even know our kid that well, even though they may want to, but they have others.
Mhm.
So honestly, it's more or less, fighting for what your child needs. Now, I mean, that's all well and said, right? But
Right.
we have to get beyond that and find out, okay, well, what do we do about that then? Because nobody listens to us, right? Nobody's listening. So it's kind of like, okay, work on ourselves. And that's what the empowered mom method is all about. Knowing that we are empowered, but how do we really show it? How do we live it? And so that's the next step to that. So as we're advocating, we have to kind of let go of all of our own expectations first. And because many of those expectations are out actually somebody else's, if we
Mm,
really think about it. So it's really, again, about becoming aware of this as well. How much of what we think we believe is coming from somebody else? Like sometimes the schools say, well, you know, they're not going to be able to get here by graduation or, this is always going to be difficult for them. If we take that as truth, then we are causing friction, right? So we have to drop all of that and really think about we know our kid and open it up. They're actually capable. These teenagers are capable of just about anything if we open that up. So,
yeah.
and what do our kids want? What do they want? Where are they? So that's kind of where I would start.
Yeah, I mean, and it sounds like that's where you start with the parents, right? From ground zero, essentially, in your program is trying to figure out what is it that your children need because there are so many people that are speaking at the same time, whether it's the teacher or the principal or a friend, a family friend that maybe, has a similar situation, but it's never exactly the same because if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, right? So everything's going to be nuanced. And then at the same time, it also sounds like knowing what your child needs is going to be separate from what you necessarily expect. So what I've noticed, and I don't know how you work through this, is that there are so many supports out there, and we're also lacking supports at the same time. But because there's so many supports, and because it seems like very disorganized and chaotic in many school systems in terms of thinking about which supports are needed, which supports can you access, right? What are the types of supports that are going to really push your child to the point where they can have the ability to reach their potential? It's so hard sometimes, I feel like, from the parents I've spoken to tease out, okay, well, that sounds like something great because it's extra, right? Extra support, but maybe that kind of support is going to hinder independence, or maybe that kind of support is going to cause some friction. Have you dealt with those experiences where parents just really needed to tease apart these things and just figure out like what exactly is it? Like what are those critical support?
Right. And, I think that for our kids, especially the ADHD, the teenagers, we have to think they're hormonal as well
Yeah.
as
Oh
they
yeah.
have this
That's
brain
an
difference, right?
understatement of the year, yeah.
Right. And it just exacerbates it, right? All these other, difficulties, I think, when the hormones hit. So as far as supports, my gosh, okay, Sharon, I hate to say it, but there isn't a whole lot out there for the high masking, the ADHD.
No.
I work mostly with preteens and teens, and there just isn't much out there because just about everything, and I hate to say it, but everything is behavior based. Like it's really looking at the behavior and kind of like, that end result to almost make everybody else comfortable, but not the child, right? And it's not in a purposeful way to hurt anybody, but it is. It's harmful, right? Because these kids, the behavior is communication and they're communicating something. Now, trying to differentiate what's hormones and what's not is tough, but you've got to get to the bottom of it first, the root of these behaviors first. So, as far as supports, it's really more or less somebody who is actually neuroaffirming and not trying to change a behavior or even to use the behavior as, "Hey, this is the challenge or this is the problem." And that's hard to do until you've done it a little bit. Yeah, I think that's a really tough question because there are so many supports out there, and everybody says they'll do certain things. But if somebody, I mean, I would ask the questions. If I was a parent, I would ask certain questions. Ask questions about an approach, like is it brain based? Is it what types of executive skills are you teaching or looking at?
Mhm.
Because if it's just skill sets, like, initiating a task and doing all this stuff, well, those are all behaviors. So
Right.
what's underlying that? We have to actually, take a brain based approach for these guys.
I'm so glad that you said that because I feel like this is a reoccurring theme on my podcast and then just even with the individuals that I work with and collaborate with. And it's so fascinating because the behaviors sometimes look like somebody's trying to act out or seek attention, which could happen, right, in the neurotypical world. But I had someone on the podcast that was speaking about, and you may be familiar with this, the learning theory versus the performance theory. I'm totally getting it wrong, but there is the ability to perform and then there's the learned expectations and the performance expectations. I believe that's what it is. And so a lot of times the individuals are engaging in certain what looks like behaviors, which are their way of expressing themselves because they haven't learned another way. They haven't really learned a way to be social in a different way. I mean, they learned that they haven't even learned kind of the foundational social interactions. And so I feel like their behaviors are looked at like that classic, "Oh, no, like, how do we create a functional behavior plan or create a behavioral intervention plan," and assess that. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that piece of behavior. And is that something that you feel like parents come to you a lot with in terms of asking you about, okay, I'm having these behaviors at home, for example, and there's a family dynamic, obviously, that they want, there's an expectation that parents have also from a family, and they feel like it's interfering. And then how do they go about that if they bring that to your attention?
Boy, yeah, see, you're hitting on a
It's a
lot
loaded
of
one, I
really
know.
good stuff, and that's loaded because I get that all the time. And the way it manifests really is that the mom is doing so much and doing a lot of the nurturing and the understanding and trying to teach, maybe the dad, and this is that I'm giving kind of an example that just happened recently. Um, and the dad's just like, no, he just has to do it. He's got to do it like this, and bam, 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 step by step. And so it's really, really hard, I think, for the family unit to deal with this within the household, not just, "Oh boy, Thanksgiving's coming up and now we've got other family members that are, influencing us and everything else." But going back to, I don't care who it is. It's not our job to teach anybody because the way the brain works, somebody else is going to take that as a threat. And so it's just going to become combative. Doesn't mean we don't love each other. Doesn't mean that, but in as far as that's concerned, when you're going up against somebody else or trying to teach them, then the other person is thinking that you're thinking they're not good enough or they aren't smart enough or they're not able to do it, So
Yeah.
that's one of the issues with the friction there. And then of course with the kids, and I have to tell you, this behavior thing, yeah, the behavior shows up and there are a couple of things going on. And Sharon, I'll tell you a couple secrets. First of all, what I found is with our kids, it's always the whys. And the example I like to give is masking. People are so like, afraid of masking. But in all honesty, we all mask.
Yeah,
Everybody masks
of
all day
course.
long, every
Yeah.
day.
Uh-huh.
So, what's the real problem is that our kids don't know why they're masking. They're masking, they don't really know why. Like, they might even do it in the right context sometimes. They don't know the true why. So, they can't use it properly and it's too hard and they're working so hard all day that they burn out. So, that's the one piece of it. And another thing is parents, the reason why they kind of get burnt out from this and they have such a hard time with the behavior is because of what everybody's trying to focus on. But also, we take things personally. So when our teenager yells and slams the door, runs into their room and slams the door, then we feel it personally.
Yep.
Oh, that's disrespectful. Why are they doing this to me again? Why do they have to treat me so bad? And it has nothing to do with that. And that's the awareness. That's a really, really difficult thing to let go of, is that it's really not about us, probably 98% of the time. It's really not. So those are two major areas with the behavior.
Yeah,
So
I
I may
mean,
have gotten off track a little bit.
no, I mean, this is all interconnected. I'm great at going off track, so I love it when people do it too. I feel like, I'm in good company. But no, I mean, you raise a few really great points that I was just curious a little bit more about. So you mentioned also around holiday time, obviously Halloween's tomorrow, and then there's Thanksgiving, and then there's, it's the season of holidays, Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever, whatever anybody's celebrating. And that's a time I think when a lot of anxiety comes in with not with the children, with the teens and tweens and the children themselves, but also with the parents because there's a situation like you said they want to be in and they want certain expectations to be fulfilled and they don't want a whole dinner to be ruined just because of something that happens where someone storms off or misinterprets something and then it goes from A to Z, the gradient of emotions, just go like it escalates in a moment's time. And so it's so is there something that you would recommend, like, during these holiday times that parents could teach their kids or maybe model for their kids in terms of how to show up during these holiday situations? And I'm sure part of it's expectations but showing love at the same time, but how can they teach them to show up to these holiday events in a way that's still accepting of them?
And it's really difficult because parents have to not just navigate this, but they have to negotiate it. And I think it's really, really hard. So just taking like a family event, what's going on? Well, you want to try to get to the root of the problem, but you want to, front load as much as you can for your child first.
Mhm.
Because number one is protecting their peace. If you're working on protecting their peace, well, you have to protect yours first and at the same time. So protecting their peace because they do get overstimulated. They don't know intuitively expectations. They don't executively put all of this information together. So front load. So give them information like who's going to be there and what kind of questions people may ask. What are the expectations? Give some of the expectations. Like just talk about it. Maybe talk about it over in the course of a week or something, just little things here and there to front load some of this information into their brain. But also, other family members don't understand. They make rude remarks sometimes, like, oh, you're just spoiling them. Like, if you do
Mm.
give in and let them walk away from the table, but protect your child's peace, whatever they need. And as your child is learning to self regulate, well, you actually need to kind of do that for them. And again, brain based learning, understanding the brain and body. And you mentioned modeling. So our kids don't model very well.
Mhm.
I mean, they do model, but then they use it wrong context sometimes,
Right.
right?
Right.
So but along those lines, like modeling regulation, yes, we can do that. But also, did you know that biologically and chemically, like biochemically, they borrow our nervous system? They
Mm.
borrow our calm. So that's just a biological thing. And so if we are calm, their nervous system has to borrow that. It's just a parent to child type thing. So if we can calm ourselves, we can help to calm them in these situations as well. But as far as dealing with other people, that's the thing. It's like, is it truth? Like, what are they saying? And why are we taking it personally? Why are we letting it bother them? That's a reflection of them. Like they just don't understand. They just don't know. They don't understand. And I know it's easier said than done, but it takes practice, and we can practice this little by little. And try to do it through protecting our peace.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned that other people may not understand, and the overstimulation may be at an all-time high, and so I'm curious your thoughts about, the idea of being flexible, and maybe they don't have to show up for the whole dinner. Maybe they show up for part of the dinner, right? Or maybe there's an event that's happening somewhere in a big space, and maybe uh, it's just too hard at this time. Doesn't mean it won't be this hard next year, but maybe it's too hard because I know parents who make accommodations for their kids in the sense where they'll say, instead of having this big party for this big milestone in their life, they're going to just do something small with them, take them on a trip, just something more intimate. And then when they're ready for it and they can get around it, they can stay and have a big party and maybe not even be present at the whole party because obviously it's so loud and overstimulating. Is this something that you support from your experience based on this brain-based approach in terms of making those kinds of accommodations?
Yeah, I say do whatever is necessary. Whatever's necessary. Like even just recently, I coached a family, that's very busy. They're very into sports. The kids are all into sports, but one of the kids, he really just gets burnt out pretty easily, especially this time of year with school work is a lot heavier.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? He may just need to miss practice one night
Mhm.
or just go for half. Or maybe you don't run that errand. You don't go to the grocery store, tonight
Mhm.
with them. It's just we have to kind of shift and make sure that we are protecting, our kids' nervous system. So yeah, totally. We don't, our kids grow up pretty fast. you know, we don't, and these guys are developing much slower in some areas. So we have to get them there. Forget about the timelines. Don't worry about it. I think that I'll tell you a story. It's like a heartbreaking story, but it's actually really good. So one of the moms in my program, um, she learned to do all of these things, and her son was graduating high school, and she had a really, really turbulent relationship with him, and that's why she came into the program because they just weren't talking. They didn't hate each other, but they weren't talking. He was a teenager, and he's just like, why. Well, he did not invite her to the graduation. Didn't want her to go to the graduation,
Oh,
but wanted his sister to go.
right.
Yeah, even though she would've before the program, she said she would've just broken down and everything, but she realized that, you know what? It was gonna be videotaped, and he, wanted to go to dinner with her afterwards, that was okay, but he didn't want whatever the reason was, it was his reason, so she was able to reason through that. Can you believe that? Like, I don't know if I would've been able to do that, but
Yeah, that would break my heart, and yeah, I mean, but that's really good, like, working through it, problem solving on her own, regulating, I guess, through your strategies.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, and she was okay with it. Like, it's okay because it's something he needs to do. So we have to remember that about our kids. Are they ready? Do they want to? Is this something that's going to make them happy or stressed? And just kind of go with it. And, yes, we should be pushing them. We should never force them. Like, I think a lot of programs in school, they're forcing the kids to learn certain skills, these executive skills and everything. And it's just making the kids more and more frustrated. And
Yeah.
it's harmful, I mean, it's harmful to their self-esteem and everything else and self-confidence. If we just kind of let them grow at their own pace, we can help, push them here and there a little bit
Mhm.
and support that. Because independence, I mean, that's what we want for our kids, right? We want them to eventually be happy and live like fulfilled life and be independent. But really, we need to teach them interdependence. I don't think independence is the word we should use. It should be interdependence because even when they're not with us, when they're off on their own, they're still going to need to depend on certain people, whether it's doctors or different resources, or so they need to learn interdependence. And I think we need to focus more on that.
I think that's a really good point you made at the end, the interdependence, because I think we too often use the word independence and it's a buzzword as many other words. And in terms of, oh, we, and as an SLP myself, the goal is to get the child to be independent. Well, none of us are independent, right? Because even if you're alone or you feel alone, at the end of the time, at the end of the day, you are communicating with other people. And there are going to be guides throughout your life that are going to help you. It's going to look different at different phases of life, and so the individual goes to college, and there are going to be other people maybe that are going to be the guides or the mentors rather than the parents. And that's also probably hard. I can just imagine parents having to let go at that point. And I know some of these parents have been so close in advocating and feeling like they need to really push their children, push the systems, and to make sure that they're doing it right by their children. So just as a follow-up, how do they work through that next transition period of letting these teens and tweens go off in their own way? That's a rough
Now
I know, it's a tough one.
it is. I'm not sure how a lot of parents do it, but I do know the parents that work with me, I help them through that. So I do work with a lot of college students, especially their first year, because that's the toughest. And the parents, let me tell you, they are so worried and they are just like freaking out constantly,
Mhm,
so worried about, their kids being able to do this. I just help coach them through the individual needs, like slowly. And honestly, a lot of my parents are like, yeah, but they're not going out, they're staying in the room all weekend and all of the, and it's like, okay, but it's the first semester. So let's see, what are they really concentrating on? What do they need? They are totally learning to live on their own, away from you for the first
mhm,
time. And so what goes into that? So we lay it all out. What are all of the things that they're doing for the first time? So that's a lot and that's a huge transition. So even though, yeah, we want them to make a friend and we want them to be able to get into a club, that's all very important, but we're going to take it step by step. And that builds that interdependence, independence, whatever you want to
yeah,
kind of call it. But yes, because you do want them to have a friend because then they are able to learn and guide them. So honestly, it can take with the people I work with, it can take 2 semesters, 3 semesters to really get to that point. So for parents who are dealing with it, just wait little by little, but you also want to make sure that they're not self-isolating
mm,
completely. And the way I swing this with my kids because they're like, "I'm fine. I have my computer games. I've got my friends on my computer,"
yeah,
and, stuff like that. And it's like, "Well, look, if you're in college, then you want to get a job doing whatever it is you want to do." And there are tons of people out there looking for the same job. So getting involved in just a club or something makes you stand out, you know?
mm,
So I use that. Like, it depends on what you want to do. Do you really want a good job? Do you want, So I use
yeah.
that because it's the
The
truth,
R
kind of,
word, the resume, the R
Yeah.
word.
The R word. Yes. Yeah. We don't talk goals. We don't talk resume. Not at
It's
all.
so funny, but that's like a bribe. Like, because with the high school and college students that I meet, for the ones that are so many of them, and I think you have the same experience as me. They're very bright, right? These are very bright individuals who are motivated, whose families have motivated them, and the resume, once the resume is mentioned, I feel like it's you don't have to give them anything else. That's like the motivation, the incentive. I gotta do this to get this on my resume. And I feel like that could be even a building block of, okay, it's a big transition. You're starting all over again in terms of building up a social world for yourself and a social network. But like you said, these things will actually help you to get to the next step, which is what you want to do anyway.
Yeah, and they don't even like a lot of them haven't been involved in anything. Maybe they don't even have a friend. They weren't
Mm,
even able to make a friend in high school. So it's all very new to them and going to a club is something it's a new concept that hey, I can make a friend there because I'm choosing to be there just like everybody else. It's not like I'm thrown into like high school. It's so hard to make friends because everybody has to be there, right? So it's difficult for our kids to make friends in that situation. But a club, yeah, maybe they can connect with somebody. And it only needs to be one person. That's another thing. Parents are like, yeah, we want friends, a group. And these guys have a lot of difficulty navigating that because of the social difficulty that's just concentrating on too many people at one time, too many things going on, and too many ifs, whats, and where's. And so one person, that's what I try to concentrate on.
yeah, I think that's great because it's just like one moment at a time, one person at a time. Let's not overwhelm our nervous system and to the point where it doesn't know how to build itself up again. You speak to something that I actually very much relate to, which is when I work with some of these folks, the individuals themselves, because again, I know you work with the parents, but you also work with the individuals themselves. And when they get to college and even in high school, some of them are very focused on academics. And so sometimes when you bring up social or you try to reinforce the need for carving out social time just to have that time to even just, get feedback from peers or to speak to peers or to connect with them, just to have a support system, especially in college. A lot of times I find just personally that there's some pushback in the sense of, well, this is just so busy. Like it's such a busy week. The academics are really coming at me. And it really is because some of the academics are so difficult. And some of these classes, to be honest with you, I never would have taken. So, I mean, I have a student who's in an engineering program and I'm like listening to some of the names and it's like physics, but on another level, which I totally over my head. So I give them props, but I feel like they get stuck in, oh my gosh, I have to complete these academic tasks. And then social kind of goes kind of behind it and lags behind. Is there something that you do, like any secret sauce that you have in terms of trying to, when you're working one on one with the individuals as well as the parents, in terms of showing them that social maybe even be more important than the academics? Not that they should not focus on the academics, but it's integral to their development and to their future to make these social connections.
Definitely. First of all, unless they're going to be sitting in their bedroom doing all their work, making $1 million from behind their computer,
That sounds lovely.
yeah, that then they might not be as social as
Right.
they will in any normal situation. So one of the examples that I use with my students is I often when I first start working with them, I ask them, what percentage of the day out of 100%, what percentage of the day do you think you think socially? And they always say, well, they say anywhere between 5 and 50%, right? I'm like, okay, well, let's think about that. When you're reading a book, you're reading about a character, if you are and you're thinking socially, what are they going to do next? Why did they do that? If Even if we are sitting in our bedroom alone just thinking about the day, we're probably recapping a situation or an interaction we had with somebody else. Well, that's thinking socially, right? So, not to mention when we're around people all the time, even if
Yep.
we're not interacting, we're still
Just
thinking
sharing
about
space.
where to stand, sharing space effectively. So, and then they're like, oh, yeah, maybe like 80 to 90%. Okay, well, does that mean something to you? I mean, if we're thinking socially, if this much social is in our lives, what do you think it's going to look like, when you're working? You still have to think socially. So we need to learn how to at least share space effectively. We don't have to make friends with everybody, but we still need to learn, how to feel comfortable around people, how to ask questions and, sometimes take criticism if we're working with people. But that's how I kind of lead into it. Like you have to get their buy-in, right? The kids themselves, the students, the people need to buy into this fact that they need to do these things. So they need to learn
Yeah.
something. So it's kind of convincing them.
Yeah, that seems really interesting. I never use a percentage in terms of thinking about the percentage of the breakdown of how much is social during the day or how much they're utilizing it, if they can estimate how much they're actually using it. But if they can visualize, I guess, okay, 80% is social, as part of the day. But how much are you utilizing of that 80%? Are you actively using it? And then they could see kind of, wait, oh, wow, I'm in the 10% mark, right? When really a lot of things require 80%. At the same time, while balancing, of course, it's you mentioned earlier being neuroaffirming and understanding that there are times that they won't be able to be social. Social just isn't going to be working for them at the time, and the mask might be pulled off. But you mentioned something very interesting earlier about masking, right? And this comes up, and I feel like everybody has a different perspective about it. And it's funny because the podcast is called Unmasking Social, right? And how, because that's the whole point, right? Taking off that mask, right? As you see fit. And I had Dr. Shore in here, Stephen Shore, who spoke about the mask meter and kind of thinking about, okay, how high on the mask meter are you in terms of how difficult of a risk is this for you in terms of taking off that mask and showing up to that place that might be anxiety provoking and also socially just at a place that you're not at yet. And so that it's okay to keep on the mask, but then if you look at your mask meter, sometimes it's a little bit lower down and it's like, okay, that's a little bit of a social risk, hanging out with those people, but I could still take my mask off because I feel comfortable enough at this point. So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts or ways that you deal with that in terms of, okay, you could still leave the mask on at times. You don't have to always unmask. Or do you feel like our individuals we work with should be encouraged to take their mask off so they can feel liberated at all times?
So that's interesting you say that. I never thought about, unmask. But okay, so my thought is, do we even unmask? I mean, I don't think we ever unmask. We may
Mm.
just put on another mask.
Mhm.
So the right mask, right? So I would focus on which mask should you be wearing, as far
Mhm.
as because okay, so I teach, and I'll tell you something, another thing I teach my students. So because it will kind of fit because it'll fit with. I'll try to understand unmasking this way. So I teach them that there are basically three versions of ourselves. Okay, we are our true self, which is usually like with our family and stuff like that. We are less than our true self. We can show less than or more than. And so our true self is like the way we are with our parents and families and stuff like that. That's pretty much 100% of ourselves. More of ourself might be very deep with like a really really good friend that we can tell anything to at all. Even we may even spin stories,
Yeah.
exaggerate to get more of a reaction, right?
Oh,
So we
yeah.
might be showing 150% of ourselves. Might get a little
Mhm.
extra goofy or a little, But then with teachers, acquaintances, even just people that we're friendly with, we show less of our true self. So we calm down a bit. So we're not changing ourselves at all. We're just showing less. So if
Mhm.
we can joke around with our family and kind of be real goofy, well, we might want to tone that down by 50% when we're in school. That's all. And why? Because people aren't ready for us, right? They don't know us well enough to know our intention. So we could be a little goofy and they might take something a little personally or be uncomfortable with it because they don't really know how to react. They don't know us well enough to know that intention. And that is also brain based, the trust that has to happen in our brain and it takes time. So I don't know about taking off the mask as much as, what mask do you need to be wearing for the situation? So even if you're like in the lunchroom and kids know, hey, I know how to interact with these people in the lunchroom, but now we're going to the classroom with the same people. We have to act differently.
Yeah.
We speak differently. We have to use different language, maybe
Mhm.
even different volume, everything. So
Right.
there, you're not taking off a mask, you're just changing it. No, and just like in any other situation, like if you're in one friend group or another friend group, one friend group may be into anime and you talk about anime and you act differently. You might act goofy like the characters or something like that. But then you're in another club like chess club and you're not going to be acting like that. You're going to be, a little bit more studious and probably, I'm not sure. So I don't know if it's like taking a mask off or just adjusting or a new mask.
Yeah. No, I'm so grateful that you shared that because that's really thought provoking for me because I never looked at it like that. Of course, we talk about shifting context, which is a similar idea, but not exactly the same. But it's kind of using a mask that fits the situation depending on your level of comfortability, which is completely normal. Not that there's one definition of normal, of course, but of course, if you feel more comfortable with somebody because you have that bond with them, you've known them for your whole life, and you've shared all your secrets, your deep dark secrets with them, your mask might be you're using maybe some mask that is, I guess, a close friendship kind of mask, I guess, versus if you're speaking to somebody that you just met and you're trying to become friends with, the mask that's on is gonna be a little bit more, withholding of information, a little bit more guarded, a little bit more shy maybe, as you get to know them, and then it depends, again, with the teacher, right? You have a different mask, obviously, because you're the student and the parent. So it's interesting and it's funny because people who are listening to this, they won't know this because this is coming out after Halloween, but it's funny that we're talking about different masks because Halloween is tomorrow and people will be wearing different masks, literally, quite literally, not just
Right.
figuratively. But no, but the reality is yeah, I mean, that's very interesting that it's really tailoring the mask to the situation because we always have masks on, always. And it's like even now, like I have my podcast mask on, right? It doesn't mean that I'm acting, right? It doesn't mean that I'm trying to be somebody who I'm not. I'm still maintaining my authenticity, but at the same time, I wouldn't be speaking like this if I was on the phone now with my boss, right?
Right.
It would be a different conversation. So yeah, you're right. We're really just switching masks. And is this something that parents start to understand over time?
Yeah, because I think a lot of people really take a look at the mental health issue. And the reason why
Yes.
we have a mental health issue with
Huge.
masking, yeah, is because we're not teaching our kids to understand what they're doing and why and what's the reason because they're just trying to hide all of themselves because they feel so insecure and they don't really know the expectations. They don't know what's going on. So they're hiding behind this mask and they don't really know why and how to change it. So it does cause then the mental health issues and, burnout and everything else.
Yeah. So because they don't know how to change the mask, that's what's causing a lot of the anxiety and the sadness and all the other co-occurring mental health issues because they're keeping some mask on, but they're not shifting the masks. And then because of that, messages become misinterpreted and a lot of confusion occurs. And then they're labeled as having behavioral issues when really they're just trying to understand what's going on because they haven't reached the point where they know that the mask has to shift or needs to shift. Well, not that it needs to shift because I'm always careful with my words on the podcast. It just maybe if it does shift, it would be more comfortable for them, right? If there was a different mask on.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Because if we really think about it, if we try to become self aware, um, do we ever completely take off the mask? You know,
No.
I don't know if we ever really do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're sitting alone by yourself, right? I mean, and you could be yourself, exactly 100% yourself, sit with your own thoughts, but then that will require 100% self-awareness, and I don't think anybody's 100% self-aware, right? So
We're
there's
ready
still a
to
little
be. Right?
What?
We're ready to be, right? That authentic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, to be that authentic with yourself, that's a hard one, right? I mean, I feel like I would need years of support after that. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's very hard, right? Because if you really sit with that and really let everything go through, and you take off the mask completely, I mean, there's no way to really do that. So you're still kind of you're masking even when you're by yourself in your own thoughts because you're thinking about the version of yourself that you think is you and the perspective that you have of yourself versus what might actually be going on. Yeah, this is very meta. I love all the meta conversations, thinking about thinking, which brings me to my one of my final points. So, speaking of meta and thinking about thinking, you're a social cognitive therapist. So, a lot of the work that you do is very much scientifically research based, evidence based, and all related to the brain and how it works in individuals with autism specifically. And so, you not only support the parents, but you also support the individuals in your program to be social and in one-on-one sessions, right? And it seems like you give them support in terms of masking and unmasking, but also how to tailor their life in terms of accessing social, whether it be through interacting with different types of people or how to advocate for themselves. And the big one, advocating for themselves, parents advocating, everybody's trying to advocate, right? As a social cognitive therapist, have you seen in terms of what's going on in the education system in general, whether it be the school settings that they're in or other individuals that are having some role in the education system, do you find that there is a way to bridge what these students may need in college with the education system by bolstering certain advocacy skills that they actually are developing and may have already?
The thing is, it goes back to when we're thinking about, especially the conversations, becoming self aware, and
Mhm.
all of the things that we've talked about tonight are, kind of leading to that, to like the expectations and understanding what other people are thinking and feeling. Putting that all together helps with that advocacy. So we really have to build the self awareness, the
Of
self
course.
confidence, and build all of these things because our kids, I mean, I have so many kids coming to me and the parents are like, I just want them to be social, be better
Mhm.
at or be able to walk up to the teacher and ask for help or raise their hand or whatever. And the thing is it's fear. It's fear of not knowing how the other person's going to respond because they can't
Right.
put that executively together. They can't put that together. What that person might say, what they might do. So that's
Predicting the outcome
yeah.
of the conversation.
Yeah, exactly, and sometimes it's just a matter of when, what about the timing? So, they may not ask a professor, they may not email or anything because they don't really know what that professor expects. So, those expectations are so important. So, as far as, bridging that from high school to, making sure that they're going to advocate, we start as early as possible. Start in elementary school, start in middle school, let, your child do some things on their own, help them send an email to the teacher just to ask something. Like if your middle school kid comes home and says, well, I just didn't understand that. Well, sit down and help them craft, a quick little email to the teacher so that they can get a response and see what that's going to be like. So that by the time, they can start doing this, as early as possible. And that's that interdependence, help them out. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not about them like they should be able to do this or they're at this age and you throw away those timelines. Everything develops naturally. Really, it's going to develop naturally. We just want to support it. So, did I really answer your question?
Well, yeah, I mean, it sounds like from what I gathered and absorbed and processed, I'm trying to use all my SLP terms. No, it sounds like basically starting early is key with advocating within the educational system for needs because if you wait until the later high school years, there are things that you're going to miss, there are things that you're not going to get because you're simply too late with the deadlines, right? But then you also mentioned about emailing a professor or emailing a teacher and asking for help, how to craft that email, right? So that also goes back to bridging the educational world with them because the educational world may not always identify or be aware of what's going on with the individual teen and tween or young adult, but that's where you as a parent can support your child in crafting that email, or let them create that email, craft that email, and ask for the clarification that they need, because emails are, or any form of communication with a teacher outside of school, is a way to advocate for what you need. And when it comes to the professors, right, the office hours and things like that. So, yes, you did answer the question, because it's all about kind of bridging the education system with their advocacy, using their own advocacy styles, obviously, but also allowing them to be interdependent and not just completely thrown to the sheep without having any guidance at all.
Right, and it happens a lot, okay? So, I don't know, so many parents listening to this, and you may know as well as I know personally, one of the goals or an accommodation, maybe, or an SDI in an IEP might be, um, taking a break when needed. Like,
Yeah,
maybe there's somewhere
I've
to
seen
go
that
or
many
whatever.
times.
Okay. How often do the kids actually utilize that? I could say maybe 90% of the time they do not.
Mhm.
Maybe close to 100%. I don't know. So that's one thing you look at. Okay, is it that the kid doesn't need a break? Not at
Right.
all. They need
No.
that break or they need 2 breaks, but they have no idea. They're not self-aware enough to know when they need the break, and then by the time they do need to know the break, they don't know what to do. I mean, are they too overwhelmed or overstimulated at that point to, and then the behavior happens. So,
Mm.
as far as advocating, it goes back to even that, just the self-awareness, self-regulation, there's so much that goes into just being able to advocate.
Yeah, taking a break is probably on, if I can guess, I'm totally making this number up, but probably on 80 to 90% of IEPs is support. Again, a lot of especially individuals where social is not automatic and advocacy is not automatic won't necessarily know internally when it is a good time to take a break, and won't know really how to actually speak up and take that break. So you're absolutely right that it's also teaching the fundamentals of, okay, how do we regulate, or how do we look into regulation, and when does our body feel not regulated, kind of the interoception, I guess, right, where we kind of can feel certain things happening in our body, and then we have to ask for that break. So there's so many things that need to be intuited from that. And so, yeah, I mean, it all goes back to, okay, how are we going to support the individuals in the systems that are in place, because we know the systems are imperfect, but that doesn't mean that parents and their neurodivergent individual teens and tweens can't work through this, just through even just, learning together with, obviously you're supporting them, you're teaching them. That's a very important skill, knowing, okay, I need a timeout right now.
Mhm.
And I mean, some adults who are neurotypical don't know that either, right? Like, I mean, in general, the things that I observe, and sometimes a lot of us maybe don't know when it's time to maybe, walk, go for that walk, whether you're at work and you're dealing with a complicated situation, or your family dealing with a complicated situation. Maybe it's time to bow out for a bit. So I feel like it's hard for everybody, but now it's an extra layer of hard when it's not automatic. It's just not socially intuitive.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. So, yeah, all those skills need to be taught, and oh my gosh, I don't even you could go into IEPs and everything
Yeah.
else because I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
about you, but you see the same goals,
Mhm.
across the board. I've seen same goals, SDIs, accommodations for different kids in different districts, but they have all the same ones. So,
Yeah, I
parents,
know.
really, we have to look at it and try to individualize it as much as possible.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
agree. And sometimes the goals are not measurable either. And this is something that I had to learn throughout my career, because in the beginning of my career, I thought, oh, okay, we can measure eye contact, right? But how do we really measure that, right? I mean, eh, you know, do we see, I mean, right now I'm like going in and out of eye contact with you. So if somebody were to measure me, I'd be getting, I don't know, a 50%. I wouldn't be doing so well, because that's right. I mean, in and out. So yeah, I think a lot more can be done in these systems, but that's why it's important for parents to have support, because a lot of them are trying to navigate such complicated, confusing systems, while also trying to work and put on the expectations that their child can really work with, not the expectations that they really want for their children, you know? The ones that can really, that the child's ready for, because some expectations are just, I think, too challenging sometimes for the teens and tweens. And that's why you said there is no timeline. Sometimes you may have to wait to, up the ante and up the expectations. And but I love how you You shared so much important information, and it seems like you're such a good support for the parents as well as the neurodivergent individuals, the teens and tweens with autism, but for the parents as well, just being a support system in terms of helping them transitioning between different stages of life, but also just helping them regulate and helping them teach advocacy and helping them really model for their children different things, but also giving them leeway and being flexible with them, which if you're going to want them to be flexible, then you're going to have to be flexible too, which is a big thing. But I love your perspective though. Really, two takeaways from this podcast that this episode that I really think is going to be interesting for people to listen to is about that mask. It really is always on, right? In some level, it's changing. It's an evolving mask. And that's why it sounds like it's so complicated and confusing. And like you said, can lead to a lot of communication breakdowns and co occurring mental health issues. And then simultaneously mentioned interdependence. Independence is not going to be achieved necessarily. Independence throughout our lives, we're always going to be interdependent. So that's also on the IEPs, by the way, right? Does it independently.
Yes, I see that term. That's why I brought it up because we see that term, we hear it all the time. It's like, oh,
Hmm.
let's make sure we kinda make that paradigm shift so we are successful and our kids can be successful.
I really hope there is a paradigm shift with that because you're right. When it comes to social or any type of speech and language goal or any communication goal in general, at the end of the day, you are going to have to communicate with other people. So there is going to be interdependence. And so, yeah, I really hope to see that paradigm shift where it's not just about gaining independence, but also learning how to be interdependent. So, yeah. But thank you so much for joining. So much to learn, so much for parents to learn from this, and also neurodivergent teens and tweens who are struggling and are working with their parents collaboratively. If you're listening, just know that your parents are trying their best. And my last question is where everybody can really find you and connect with you. And
So my website is tobesocial.org. That's the number 2 and then besocial.org. And that's where all of my programs and services pretty much live. I don't update it too often because I am on Instagram, TikTok, um,
all the
and
things.
yeah, yeah. So, but I do have, I know this is going to be coming out later, but in 2 weeks from now, November 12th, I have a masterclass on rewire the reaction. So it's
Hmm.
really everything kind of we talked about here. We react and our kids are reacting all the time. And this is for parents and professionals to learn very quickly how to rewire that reaction that we have, whether it's to our spouse or to something that happens at work or whatever. If we're having the same reaction, I teach that. That will live. So you can get that through the website as well. But yeah, that's how you can probably get me. If you see me on TikTok, I don't know.
It's great. It's
I
great that you
do.
have a TikTok. Not many of my guests have had TikToks. I love that.
Oh, I had so much fun. It's
Yeah.
just fun. Sometimes I give insights, and I've just gotten into reflecting. The self-awareness is huge, and we can do it at any time, parents. Now I'm almost 54 and I'm just starting to reflect on my whole life and how maybe autistic I am. I definitely have been diagnosed with ADHD, but so there are some parallels to a lot of my students, and I talk about them on TikTok. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, so many people remain undiagnosed and so many get the diagnosis later in life. And I have characteristics of ADHD myself, but have never been diagnosed because I never went to the neuropsychologist. But if you'd ask a family member or you'd ask anybody around me, they would definitely say that yes, indeed, which is why some of us really connect to the neurodivergent teens and tweens because we've lived through a lot of it. And the anxiety that comes along with it is not so easy either. It's turbulent times, it's ups and downs. And progress is never linear, for anybody. So, I mean, I just feel like that's what you're really um, zooming in on. That there will be ups and downs throughout the process for the parents and their teens and tweens, and that's okay. But it's so great that you're doing this on TikTok too, because I don't know many right now that really operate off of TikTok too. But there's so much creativity on there. There's so many ways that you could reach such a large audience on there because so many people are logging on there and are looking for ways to connect that's a little more, I guess, like, brief and fun and engaging and lighthearted. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah, lighthearted. I like that. That's why I like
yeah.
it. It's just fun
Yeah,
and
yeah. I mean, I
light.
tried TikTok many years ago with some of the dancing. I tried to replicate some of the dance moves. I think it was during COVID, actually, and yeah, all of us had our moments during COVID, and for me, it was let me just take off on TikTok and have all my dance routines. And then one day I looked at it and said, I don't think I could do this anymore." It was, like, probably towards the end of COVID, but it was fun while it lasted, my dance. But yeah, so thanks again for joining us, and, we'll be in touch. I'm looking forward to staying in touch with you.
You're very welcome. This was fun. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks for joining us on Unmasking Social, where we neurodiverse advocates and those who support them explore how real friendship begins when we start showing up as ourselves. If today's episode resonated with you, please share it with a friend, leave a review, or follow me for more conversations that provide information on neurodivergent ways of thinking, communicating, and connecting. Until next time, keep staying social.